The first tear slipped before she even felt it. Margaret hadn't cried in months. She thought she had run out of tears long ago, but standing under the cold morning light at a quiet bus stop on the outskirts of Denver, something inside her finally cracked. Her arms wrapped tightly across her thin frame, clutching the only sweater she owned. She wondered if anyone would even notice if she simply vanished. Life had taken so much already, her job, her apartment, her sense of worth, until she felt like a ghost drifting through the world. But as she stared numbly at the pavement, she didn't realize that someone was watching her, someone who would change the rest of her life. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps more people see stories that remind us the world still has goodness in it. Margaret had been living outdoors for nearly 8 months. It wasn't supposed to be that way. She used to work at a small printing shop. She used to bake banana bread every Sunday. She used to sit at her kitchen window and hum her favorite hymn, Blessed Assurance, while sipping coffee. Then came the sudden layoff, the medical bills from an unexpected surgery, and the chain reaction that spiraled too fast for her to stop. Friends drifted away, family ties had long since frayed, and the city shelters were always full. Every day became an exercise in survival, her world shrinking to nothing but cold nights and colder mornings. On this particular day, she tried to keep her head down as a little girl and a man approached the bus stop. Margaret assumed they would avoid her like most people did. She had learned to disappear, to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible so no one felt the need to judge her. But the little girl's soft voice, bright, curious, and startlingly gentle, cut through the air like a warm beam of sunlight. The girl's name was Hannah, about 7 years old, dressed in a pale blue dress and a loose gray cardigan, her hand intertwined with her father's. The man, Jacob, tall and steady-looking with concern etched across his face, gave Margaret a polite nod, the kind most strangers gave when they wanted to be kind but cautious. Hannah, however, stepped toward Margaret with a fearlessness only children seem to have. Margaret quickly turned her face away, ashamed of how she must look. Her hair unkempt, her eyes tired, her shoes worn to the sole. She didn't want pity. She didn't want questions. She wanted to remain unnoticed. But Hannah stood her ground, her small hand extended toward her like an offering of pure humanity. In that moment, Jacob tried gently to pull his daughter back, whispering something that sounded like concern, but Hannah shook her head with firm innocence. She looked at Margaret with a tenderness Margaret hadn't seen in years. And Margaret, unable to stop herself, felt another tear slide down her cheek. She swallowed hard, telling herself to stop. But Hannah noticed, and that was when she uttered the words that shattered whatever was left of the fragile wall around Margaret's heart. Please don't cry. You can come home with us. The simplicity, the sincerity, the complete lack of judgment. It broke her. For the first time in months, Margaret felt seen, not as a burden, not as a failure, not as a problem to be ignored, but as a person, as someone who mattered. And in that moment, she could hardly breathe. Jacob quickly knelt beside Hannah, whispering again, but Margaret gently shook her head and tried to wipe her tears with trembling hands. She managed to smile, though it was small and cracked around the edges. She tried to tell Hannah she was okay, that she didn't want to trouble anyone, but the words tangled in her throat. She had grown so unused to kindness that she no longer knew how to receive it. And yet Hannah didn't take her hand back. She simply waited, eyes wide and full of an understanding far beyond her years. Margaret finally forced herself to speak, her voice barely audible. She thanked the little girl for her kindness, assuring her that she didn't need to worry. But Jacob stepped forward slowly, cautiously, and asked if Margaret needed help. Real help, not the kind that came with judgment or conditions. He mentioned they volunteered at a local church outreach program, that they had connections with support workers, that they could call someone right now if she wanted. Margaret hesitated. Trusting strangers felt like stepping off a cliff. Life had taught her that offers often came with expectations she couldn't meet, but Jacob's tone held no pressure. Just compassion. Just openness. And Hannah's little hand, still waiting for hers, made something inside Margaret finally whisper, maybe it's safe to hope again. With a swallow, she nodded. They didn't take her home, not immediately, not literally as Hannah had offered, but they stayed with her. Jacob made a few calls, A woman from a church relief program arrived within minutes. She brought warm water, fresh socks, a bag of food, and most importantly, a voice that spoke to Margaret like she was worth saving. And through all of it, Hannah stayed close, occasionally looking up at her with that same patient tenderness that had first reached Margaret's heart. Over the next few weeks, everything began to change. Margaret was given a room at a transitional housing center. Counselors helped her manage the overwhelming stack of practical problems she had been drowning in. Volunteers helped her get new clothes. A caseworker helped her access healthcare support she didn't know existed. Restoration, though slow and uneven, felt possible. But the most unexpected part was the friendship that grew. Jacob and Hannah visited her every week. They brought homemade meals, books, and sometimes drawings Hannah made just for her. Crayon portraits, flowers, little hearts with the words "You are loved." Margaret found herself slowly remembering who she used to be. She prayed again. She smiled again. And one morning, she woke with a feeling she hadn't felt in nearly a year: hope. Months later, she found part-time work at a community center. She saved enough to rent a small studio apartment, and on the day she moved out of the shelter, Hannah brought her a housewarming gift, a simple framed picture she'd drawn of the three of them together, holding hands at the bus stop where it had all begun. Margaret cried again that day, but for a different reason. She realized she had been saved not by major systems or grand gestures, but by a child's pure kindness, by a little girl who refused to ignore her pain. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps these messages of compassion reach others who need a reminder of hope. Before we end, please leave a comment below. Have you ever witnessed a moment of unexpected kindness that changed someone's life? And with that, Margaret's story stands as a reminder. Sometimes the smallest voice can offer the biggest redemption, and sometimes all it takes is one outstretched hand to bring someone home again.